For some reason, I've been turned into a vending machine!
What the am I watching? Isekai is taking over the world. Every year, there's a new anime that takes the internet by storm about someone being reborn as a powerful warrior or someone's little sister. Every isekai nowadays seems to always rehash the same material. A complete loser gets a second chance at life and just so happens to be the savior of a new world, gaining everything they sought after in their past life. Every isekai with way too long of a title follows this exact formula. But somehow, it works. Smartphones, vending machines. If you enjoy watching isekai, there isn't anything wrong with that. However, when I reflect on the past few years, the stories that have been told are either heavily recycled or lack substance that truly sets them apart. But where did it all go wrong, and will we ever see an isekai that has the power to dominate the mainstream ever again?
I am from Tokyo, Japan. Nice to meet you, Jess.
This is exactly why the question comes to mind. Over the years, we've seen a surplus of isekai like this with no creativity or effort to stand out, and it makes me wonder if the genre will ever reach the same heights from years before. Isekai at its core has always been appealing, set in an entirely new world where the characters get to meet people, have magical powers, and go on adventures. The entire concept is fascinating, but the path that isekai has fallen down is anything but that. In every story, the same main character gets reincarnated, becomes insanely overpowered, and lives out a harem fantasy. Even as a vending machine, he's surrounded by characters who have zero personality besides boobs. It amazes me how this fan service-packed appliance adventure somehow racked up over 2,000 perfect ratings despite everything else falling flat. Now, my goal isn't to heighten one series' extremities as the diagnosis of the entire genre, but even looking at other series such as In Another World with My Smartphone and The Story of a Man Who Turned into a Pig, isekai has become almost unrecognizable due to these recycled tropes, to the point where it seems that the genre has lost its true meaning down the line. But why did this all happen? As the years went on and the genre expanded, authors couldn't rely on typical tropes of power and magic anymore. They had to stand out, and what better of a way than to add more boobs? Authors had to think outside the box in order to be original in a place where their genre was becoming too popular. They did get lucky, however, because the ceiling of isekai is infinite. You can damn near create any plot imaginable because the fantasy world is made up. So imagine an author's mind when they know they can create a story and basically get away with anything. That's probably how this dumpster fire was made. The Suicide Squad Isekai is a prime example of isekai at its worst. It tried to mesh the dark anti-heroes of the Suicide Squad with the generic isekai tropes, which ended in a disgraceful mess. Instead of being gritty and dark like in the original DC material, the characters were flat and uninspired and only exist to deliver fan service. The anime doesn't just fail to bring anything new to the table, it actively drags the genre down by turning what should be a fresh idea into yet again another cash grab. This is the kind of anime that makes you question whether the isekai genre is beyond saving, as it's built upon everything wrong with modern isekai: recycled storytelling, recycled world building, and recycled tropes. But these tropes and common themes had to come from somewhere. They had to become popularized by a series that shocked the world, and in this case, it was Mushoku Tensei. The anime has its fair share of harems and weird moments, but it's commonly praised as the isekai that started it all. It popularized the genre to become what it is now. It paved the way for so many series to follow in its footsteps because of how popular it made the isekai name. But if this was the staple for future isekai, why did Mushoku Tensei succeed where other series failed? The anime gave us a protagonist who feels human. Unlike other isekai leads who quickly become overpowered and collect a harem without any effort, Rudeus' journey is filled with struggles and setbacks. His character isn't just about gaining power. He learns to overcome his past traumas to make amends for his mistakes, and genuinely matures as a person. This is a rare sight in modern isekai, and it's what sets Mushoku Tensei apart. It provides a different take on the self-insert protagonist. We're used to the perfect and strong main character who never takes accountability for his actions, but in this case, he's not perfect. He's flawed and has to constantly work to better himself. Nothing is handed to him. In a new world with magic and an opportunity to become a better person, he's the only one who has the power to make a change. So with the staple of the genre having a story with depth, characters who grow, and a world that feels real, why did other series who tried to replicate this fail? Authors who saw the success of the anime thought that the fantasy world, harems, and power systems were the cause of its popularity, so when they tried to imitate just that, it fell flat. Series like ReZero broke away from the standard isekai formula by making the protagonist powerless in combat, and instead, relying on his ability to rewind time upon death, allowing him to learn from his failures. Unlike typical isekai, where the protagonist has everything handed to them, Subaru has to earn each of his victories, through perseverance and suffering. The unique concept of dying in order to move forward brought a new take to the genre, which made ReZero stand out as a staple for what to follow. The reason why series like Mushoku Tensei and ReZero became so popular wasn't because of fan service or tropes that are commonplace nowadays, it was because of the effort it made to stand out, with immersive world building and characters that actually meant something, just like Sword Art Online. Sword Art had a typical isekai plotline, but in 2012, it dominated the scene. The series introduced us to a virtual reality world where the stakes were life and death, making every moment intense and meaningful. Season 1 took the world by storm. The game-based power system and aesthetic set the quality standard for isekai and inspired many future series of the genre. However, as Sword Art progressed, it began to fall down the path that plagued many isekai series today. What began as a story about survival in a life or death game slowly relied on overpowered strength and underdeveloped characters, which minimized the tension and impact that made it stand out in the first place. As the story progressed throughout multiple worlds, the series lost its focus and became more of a power fantasy than the adventure it once started as. While it's no doubt the anime set a standard for isekai, it also succumbed to the initial tropes it sought to transcend. The issues it gave into are shown in many modern isekai today. It lost the tension that made the plot gripping and engaging. Kirito became overpowered, and there was fan service left, right, and center. Even an anime that paved the way for so many others fell from grace, and the series that followed in its footsteps suffered from the same pitfalls. And that's the isekai problem. Some series didn't try to be unique, like in Another World with My Smartphone, where the main character dies but gets to bring a phone with him that gives him unlimited power. Where this series fails is with the lack of tension and stakes. The protagonist is practically invincible from the start, making any conflict feel trivial, while ReZero puts an emphasis on the consequences of actions and the weight of failure. Smartphone puts down a stereotypical idealized fantasy, which ultimately falls short in comparison to the emotionally driven plot of ReZero. And while ReZero shined through tension and emotion, other series like Konosuba took the spotlight by using satire and humor to critique isekai as a whole. As opposed to bearing an overpowered main character in a world that bends to his will, Kazuma is literally a loser.
Hey, don't you call me a geek? And I'm not a shut-in! I died outside my house!
He died of shock and pissed his pants trying to save a girl from what he thought was a truck, but it was a tractor. He's lazy and weak, but it's this very defiance from what we typically see from isekai that makes Konosuba stand out. It succeeds because it captures what makes isekai bland and subverts it in its own ways. Kazuma isn't overpowered. He often fails, but it's those failures that make his adventures enjoyable, whereas what we typically see is stories with no tension because we know the protagonist will always come out on top. The difference between what makes a good isekai and a bad isekai lies in the change the characters face. In good isekai, the characters use their new lives as ways to become better people. Subaru's return by death ability is more of a curse than anything, but it forces him to face his fears and the traumas of seeing those he cares about suffer time and time again. He wants to use his new life to become a hero and someone to be relied on. The change he goes through is what's missing from many modern isekai, where the protagonist doesn't move past their old habits and never faces a real struggle. Power is almost as important. Although Sword Art stood out with real stakes and players' death in the game affecting them in real life, it also suffered from repetitive and recycled concepts that stripped the tension that initially made it great. But on the other hand, ReZero and even Mushoku Tensei understood that tension and the struggle that characters go through are what keeps audiences waiting for more. Whether it's Subaru's relentless perseverance through death or Rudia's continued desire to become a better person, they provide stakes that matter and flawed characters who want to use this new world to change their lives. However, in bad isekai, everything is handed to the characters on a silver platter, with no struggle or consequence, making them flat, uninspired, and in the end, not sticking the landing. The effort that goes into building a world that challenges its characters and forces them to grow is what ultimately differentiates the two. So, where does this leave the isekai genre? After seeing its rise and fall, fans are left wondering about what can be done to breathe life back into the genre and if the damage is even reversible. In a state where every series is saturated and predictable, the only way to move back is to go back to what worked while avoiding what caused its downfall. We've seen the success of ReZero and Mushoku Tensei not because of overpowered characters, but because they challenged their characters by putting them in situations that forced them to grow and build worlds that felt alive. The main issue with modern isekai is the overfixation with power, harems, and fan service, without taking into account what real storytelling is. We want to see characters who are flawed, who fail, but overcome everything the new world throws at them. If every character was as strong as Goku for the entire series and never faced a challenge, we wouldn't care. The stakes need to be real, because without them, there's no reason to care. Protagonists with no development, characters who become overpowered, worlds that feel the same, and random boobs are what needs to be avoided if the genre wishes to take back its throne. There needs to be emotion, high stakes, the occasional boob, and worlds that breathe life to make isekai what it once was. If authors continue to take risks and move beyond these tropes that define the genre for far too long, The future of isekai will be bright. Authors need to start creating characters that mean something and building worlds that feel real. I want to experience a story that challenges its characters, where they face real consequences and have to make difficult decisions. Authors need to avoid fan service and tropes we've seen 100 times. The surplus of recycled concepts doesn't bring anything new to the genre. I don't want to see characters who get everything handed to them or worlds built with the same settings as others, but it's going to take authors who want to create more than just cash grabs to make a change. We need them to bring something new to the genre, new worlds we've never seen before, and stories that haven't been told. Because when this happens, this subgenre produces some of the most powerful tales ever told. Subscribe. I make videos like these when I can. I appreciate all the love and support that you guys show me, and yeah, peace. Mwah.